Thanks everyone for joining. Welcome to the T5 webinar sponsored by the Texas PACE Authority. This month, our focus is on utility incentives, part one of understanding what's available, sort of the landscape that's out there, different tools and resources. And then what we're going to do is next month, in September, we're going to have a deeper dive on utility incentives, and we'll have a number of utility representatives on that webinar to talk about different programs. So for the webinar today, if you're not familiar with Google Meet, it is a live platform, which means that anyone can communicate. We can see you live, we can hear you live. So since we're using this for a webinar purpose today, if you'll please mute and disable your video, that would be great. It'll cut down on different distractions and interference that tend to happen during webinars. We'll have probably no live Q&A today, but my email address is here, dubtaylor@texaspaceauthority.org. So please send me questions you have as they come up. We'll answer those questions and we'll post them to the TPA website for the benefit of everyone. So please do submit those questions. The webinar will be recorded and we'll have that available, linked on the TPA website for later. If you attend today, you'll receive a PDH certificate that'll be emailed to you to show that you attended, and that may help you fulfill some professional development hour requirements, and also a survey, and then a PDF of the slides. So you'll have all that information. So thanks for attending. And we welcome your input, feedback, and certainly ideas for future webinars. So with that, let's get into it. Today, again, maximizing utility incentives, part one. I'm Dub Taylor. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Texas PACE Authority. I joined TPA in February of 2020, just this year, after 2 decades heading up the State Energy Conservation Office, part of the state of Texas, where we did public sector energy efficiency projects, water efficiency projects, both technical support as well as project financing. And then prior to that, in the private sector, I have had experience working in the commercial real estate sector, property appraisal, leasing, property management, a variety of things. So PACE helps me, tie those two worlds together, and I'm happy to be involved. And it's a great opportunity, and hopefully folks will get a lot out of this webinar today as well. So the T5 series, as we're calling it, that's TPA's third Thursday at 2 training. We've had 3 webinars so far. There on the left, you can see, first of all, April 16th. These were focused on service providers, are more technically oriented. Again, those webinars are recorded. They're available on our YouTube channel, and those are the links. You can go to our website, and they'll be there as well. Today, maximizing utility incentives, part one. We're going to take a break next month because the third Thursday would fall normally when schools would be starting, and people are busy in many cases with that. Although who knows what school start means this year, but we're going to take August off regardless. And then we're going to come back in September on the 17th with a deeper dive, as I mentioned, part 2 on maximizing utility incentives. And we'll be hearing from a variety of different utility providers on how their different programs operate and how they can be incorporated as part of PACE projects. So mark your calendar for that September 17th T5 webinar. So today's agenda, I'm going to do a review of PACE in Texas and how it works. If you've been on these webinars before, you've seen some of this, so it may be a good review, or you may need to check email or something during at least the first segment. But I know there are some new participants and some folks from the utility industry on the webinar today that maybe don't have that background, so it's a useful foundation. Then we're going to talk about the utility landscape, the different types of providers, the structure we have in the state of Texas, which is pretty unique. I think every state varies. Ours, I think, is different and creates some challenges and some opportunities as well. Go into the different types of incentives that are available, how we have seen utility incentives applied to PACE projects in some case studies, and then leave you with some resources and to follow up on what we've discussed today. So that's the agenda. So getting right into it, in the commercial office building space, there is a huge untapped opportunity for energy and water efficiency projects. About half of the U.S. energy consumption is shown here in this EIA chart, and about 3/4 of the electric generation consumed in the United States is used to heat, cool, and operate buildings. Big numbers. And as you can see on the left, the red bar, the red line that goes up, is electricity sales in the commercial sector. A lot of that, of course, is plug load, IT-related things that we're plugging in, but we're also conditioning more space as we add more space. So that line has gone up pretty dramatically. And then the challenge on the financial side is that our electricity rates and for the most part, our energy rates remain pretty low, pretty reasonable across the country. Texas, that's certainly the case. We have pretty low electric rates. So if you're trying to cash flow or cost justify an energy or water efficiency project on savings alone, that can be challenging and may require some unique financial offerings, and that's what we have through PACE. So challenges equal opportunities here. So what is PACE? Property assessed clean energy financing. We don't have the F at the end of PACE, but that really is what it is. It's a long-term financing structure that allows 100% financing for certain types of projects, including energy efficiency, water conservation, distributed generation projects. Essentially, projects, things that are on the customer side of the meter that can reduce demand and further optimize those facilities. In Texas, this is available for commercial and industrial, as well as multifamily, as long as it's a multifamily complex with 5 or more units. So individual residential, it does not qualify for PACE in Texas, nor does publicly owned properties. So the state, the office I used to be with, has some projects and programs for public sector, and you can contact SECO, the State Energy Conservation Office, for that. How does it work? Well, PACE projects are repaid through a special assessment that matches the useful life of the improvements. So you can, instead of a short-term loan, you can have a longer-term loan that better aligns the benefits with the costs. It's state authorized through state law. Local governments then create local programs and define a PACE district. And then as property owners, they can voluntarily participate if they think this makes sense, if it's a good financing mechanism for them. And it's open market, meaning that any capital providers, contractors, owners, there's no pre-qualified or predefined list of participants. If it makes sense, then they could probably be part of it. The types of improvements that can be funded through PACE. This is just a sample list, but in the energy side, HVAC, lighting, controls, combustion upgrades, fuel switching, distributed renewable energy systems, as well as distributed generation systems of all types. On the water side, fixtures, water, wastewater, improvements, reuse, a variety of different things. So this is just really a sample, but essentially anything that reduces energy or water usage or generates power on the customer side of the meter is something that potentially could qualify. So that's what we're talking about as far as the eligible improvements. And why is PACE different, and how does this help? If you look at the graph on the left, under a conventional financing scenario, an owner would maybe need to go to a lender, to a bank, secure an equipment loan to replace aging equipment, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, things of that nature. And the term of a loan like that might be 5 years. And so for the duration of the loan, while they're in repayment, their utility savings from that project are not greater than their repayment. So they're upside down financially, at least for the first part. With PACE, you take that repayment and you stretch it over a longer period. You knock it on its side, as you can see on the right. And so you better align the benefits from these longer term savings projects with the repayment. And so in the PACE scenario, you can be cash flow positive from day one. Here's an example of that. This is an actual project, and the blue line shows that under the PACE financing arrangement, you can be cash flow from day one, whereas the self-funded option, the yellow bar that goes down, that's capital that the owner has to expend on the project, and then they begin realizing savings from day one, but they start well below that line. And then the financed option, you're below the line for a while before you come back up. So PACE, again, cash flow from day one, the way that these are structured. It helps overcome investment barriers. No upfront capital is needed. You can fund the project for the useful life of the equipment, 20 years in some cases, 100% financing. It can be passed on to tenants as an operating cost. So in the case of apartments, this is a way to make those improvements to the facilities themselves, and then the tenants who are paying the bills benefit. So it's a good solution there. And then it stays with the land, the lien does, so it can be transferred upon sale. So it's really a win-win-win. Property owners benefit, their tenants in the case of either a mall, a lease property, or multifamily they can receive lower energy bills, better living conditions, improved comfort. For contractors, this is a way to help finance the projects that maybe the contractor have helped define that otherwise there wouldn't be capital available for. For lenders, it's a low-risk new loan product. The state benefits, reducing peak electricity demand on days like this when everyone's running their air conditioner full blast to try to stay cool in the 100-degree heat. And then communities, because this is a means of reinvesting in assets and local properties that maybe have been neglected or need some critical upgrades. By the numbers here in Texas, and this is PACE so far, what you can see is on the left, the pie chart, most of the projects have been in the commercial and retail sector, quite a few in hotel, and then commercial and office. The financing numbers, the bar graph on the right, 2016 we started. In 2019, you can see there were as many PACE projects done there as in all the years before. 2020, of course, everyone's impacted by COVID. PACE is no exception, but we still seen a strong pipeline of projects and have closed a number of projects this year as well. And most of these are energy efficiency related. 55% water conservation and distributed generation are part of the projects as well. And over $110 million in investment in PACE projects to date. The PACE market is growing. We are up to actually 51 counties and cities that are offering PACE as of Tuesday. The one that's not on the map yet is Dawson County, which is about halfway between Midland and Lubbock. The county commissioners and the judges voted to create the program there on Tuesday of this week. And so we're up to 51. Again, $110 million of investment today, and more than half the population is covered where PACE is available. Our group, the Texas PACE Authority, we sit in the middle. We serve all of these entities. We work on behalf of local governments, essentially as their agents to operate their PACE programs. We work with property owners to help them define and move PACE projects through the pipeline. Capital providers, ensuring that the projects that they're wanting to finance meet the criteria we have in state law and our guidelines. And then the service providers, we're a resource for them as well to help them make sure that the projects they're designing meet the criteria as well. So we sit in the middle and we help facilitate the projects. That's our role. The PACE project, and this is really kind of an oversimplified version of how the projects themselves work. A contractor working on behalf or with an owner conducts an energy or water analysis. In Texas, we have a requirement that an independent third-party review be conducted. That's the ITPR of the savings that ensures that what's being proposed is going to perform and work for the owner. Then it moves to project construction, and then the ITPR comes back to do a verification to make sure that the installation was done properly. Key to this in the energy water analysis is the energy and water analysis, and this really matches up very well with so many utility programs that have some of the same requirements. So we're looking at the baseline conditions, defining those through either an analysis of utility bills, could also be a modeled analysis if utility bills are not available or if there's not a comprehensive history. And then the savings calculations for the improved situation projected against those baseline. That's critical. There's a report format and how this report gets completed. And then again, it has to be reviewed and approved by the independent third-party reviewer. Key to qualifying for PACE is that projects have to meet a payback criteria. We call it a savings to investment ratio, or SIR. It's a simple calculation that involves the savings projected over the life of the project, and then the total cost of the assessment, the financed amount. And utility incentives can be very helpful here because in a lot of cases, you may have a project that doesn't quite clear the payback or the SIR threshold. However, utility incentives, if they can be secured, essentially can act as an owner's contribution or as cash contributed to the project to buy down the cost so that it does clear that SIR requirement. Our standard is that the SIR has to be equal to or greater than 1. And the way you do that calculation is you, again, take the savings, projected savings, divide it by the investment, and it needs to be 1 or greater. So the example here shows an SIR of 1.5. That would qualify from a financial standpoint. So utility incentives could really help get projects over that line. So the utility landscape, let's move on to that now. As I said, in Texas, it is a interesting picture, the landscape, fairly complicated. And I'm going to touch on all 4 of these areas during the webinar today. So let's start with electric. The investor-owned utilities, and these are the companies that operate the wires, the meter, that generally own and operate the meter that's on the side of your building. There are 9 of those, and they have a very big service footprint. The majority of the electric accounts in the state of Texas are served by investor-owned utilities. So even though there are not that many of them, they have very large service territories. And under state law, their job is only to provide the electricity and the metering services. We have retail competition in most of the state, majority of the state, which means you can select who you buy electricity from, your power, and then it gets transmitted through the common infrastructure that is managed by the investor-owned utilities. And those investor-owned utilities also operate the energy efficiency programs. The next category, MOUs, municipally owned utilities, 72 systems across the state. These are city municipal electric systems. You've heard the names: Austin Energy, CPS Energy San Antonio, Denton Municipal Electric, city-owned, city-operated, city-governed systems. And then electric cooperatives, 64 different distribution systems across the state. There also are generation and transmission electric cooperatives that are operated at the wholesale level, but the names you'll see on most utility bills, Pedernales Electric Cooperative, et cetera, are the distribution systems. With gas, the LDCs, local distribution companies, they can be either investor-owned or municipal. So a couple of different types there. Water, over 3,000 water utilities. It's an amazing number, and it's a mix of everything from large municipal water systems to small municipal utility districts, special utility districts, water supply corporations. The map of water utilities is amazing to look at. And then wastewater, quite a few, 877 wastewater and sewer utilities, not as many as water utilities, but still quite a number there. So let's first of all start and take a look at the electric investor-owned utilities. As I mentioned, they are a regulated utility. There is oversight provided by the Public Utility Commission of Texas. There is a requirement also that these investor-owned utilities offset a certain percentage of projected growth and demand through energy efficiency programs. And so to meet those goals, there is a set of approved energy efficiency program types that they can choose to operate, and we'll go into that in a minute. There's common program structure for these. The Public Utility Commission has a third-party evaluation, measurement, and verification provider that reviews performance of the projects and how that performance is being reported. And then there is a common technical document called the Technical Reference Manual that really governs how these programs operate and how they're evaluated. The Public Utility Commission on its website has a great one-stop shop. All of this information is filed under Project 38578. The link is there, or you can just Google it, and it has all the information you could ever want to know, as well as filings, presentations. Often, usually twice a year, the Public Utility Commission hosts meetings of the energy efficiency providers, where they provide updates and other interested parties can attend. So that's a good one-stop shop. The landscape with MOUs and cooperatives is very different. In Texas, they are self-governed. When we moved to retail competition back in actually 2001, even though the change in law was done in 1999, it determined that the wires companies that were the part of the integrated investor-owned utilities were still going to be subject to regulation, because there was no need to have two sets of wires going down to serve a neighborhood, and being essentially a kind of a common carrier, more of a common asset with a monopoly service territory. There was need for regulation to ensure that ratepayer investment in that infrastructure was a good investment. So that's the investor owns. For municipals, they were exempted. They essentially made the case that we are governed by city councils, boards of our peers, and in the case of electric cooperative members. And so we're in the best position to provide that governance, and that's the way it's structured. So there is no specific program requirement for energy efficiency offerings the way there is for investor-owned utilities. And because of that, there is a wide variation in the type of offerings. We're going to go into that in a second. Gas utilities, investor-owned LDCs, most of these are first subject to municipal oversight. That is where they have a franchise agreement with a city or an incorporated area. If that city decides that they want the natural gas company to offer incentives and for a commercial for energy efficiency, that can be part of it. Some do, some don't. We'll go into that. And then there are no energy efficiency program requirements. Again, unlike the investor-owned utility service territory. So a wide variation in what's offered. Municipal gas systems, again, being parts of city departments, self-governed at the city level. Again, no EE program requirements and wide variation in the offerings. So quite a landscape. And then we get into water and wastewater. No uniform efficiency or conservation requirements, self-governed. The PUC has general oversight and supervision over certain water and wastewater and sewer utilities, but in most cases, you have a city, a county, or a local entity, a local governmental entity that has that operational jurisdiction. There is an interesting mapping tool the PUC has on its website that allows you to look at the entire state, but then drill down to zip codes, cities, and different areas to see which type of provider is covering which part of the state. And the link to that is there. So that's the utility landscape and the type of providers. So let's take a look now at the different utility incentives, the types of incentives that are available through these different providers. It's kind of like this. You've heard there are incentives out there. You can see like the little house in the middle, but how do you get there? How do you navigate that? And it can be a challenge. And one thing we've observed with PACE projects is that in many cases, those utility incentives, even though the PACE project may be eligible for them, those utility incentives go untapped. And part of it is not the owner maybe not being familiar, the contractor not being familiar with this type of incentive and how to negotiate a labyrinth like this. So it is a challenge, but there are tools and there are resources to help you do that. And we at the Texas PACE Authority want to help you do that as well. So for investor-owned utilities, this is the map that shows the coverage. And as you can see, I mentioned 9 before. So you have AEP, 2 different companies, the Central and the North Division. You have CenterPoint, which is generally the general Houston area. El Paso Electric, obviously in El Paso and far west Texas. Entergy, which is southeast Texas, the deep blue there. Southwestern Electric Power Company, which is kind of in the northeast, Texas, New Mexico, which has a bifurcated service territory, both north and then some around the south of Houston, Texas City area, and then Excel, which is up in the Panhandle. So as you can see, there's a lot of white on this map that's not covered, and that's covered by the other types of utilities. Electric investor-owned utilities, their energy efficiency programs are very substantial. And as you can see on the right, in 2019, collectively, there's $126 million in electric utility energy efficiency programs that was spent. The savings those programs delivered, 480 megawatts and 650 gigawatt hours, very substantial. The chart there that's in the center shows, and this is a fairly complicated process, part of that labyrinth that owners have to negotiate, and likely why, in some cases the owners don't pursue this. And this is really a result of state law, again, that separated out the wires companies from the generators from the retail providers. So the law passed part of the electric restructuring bill. And so for investor-owned utilities, they provide funds for different types of energy efficiency programs, 2 broad categories there on the right in the green boxes: market transformation programs, which can be more kind of technical assistance, training, things like that. And then standard offer, which is a different way of saying rebates. So those are incentives that go directly for projects. The blue box, and then the expansion of that on the left, shows how these programs are actually delivered. They're delivered through what are called project sponsors. So these can be energy service companies, contractors, people who are registered with the utility to essentially deliver the savings and access the utility dollars that are available for those savings. Customers are there. They work with the project sponsors directly, not with the utilities directly. This is a regulatory split, again, that makes it somewhat challenging. But again, the programs are well established, well developed, continue to be refined, and deliver very significant savings and have quite a bit of budget available. So investor-owned utilities, this is the model. Electric municipally owned utility service territories, I mentioned there are 72 of them across the state. Some are pretty big cities: Austin, San Antonio, Garland, Denton, and then some are very small. I think Goldsmith out there in far west Texas is one of the smallest electric providers. So they vary widely in their offerings. Some examples of different electric municipally owned utility energy efficiency programs here. Austin Energy, which has been operating these programs for decades, one of the first utilities to really embrace demand side savings as a means of serving load. Their commercial rebate and incentive programs offer incentives for heating and cooling, for lighting, new construction, and other general property improvements. In some cases, building envelopes, roofs, things like that. CPS Energy, which serves the greater San Antonio area, has a program, sort of an umbrella, if you will, that's called the Save for Tomorrow Energy Plan, or STEP. And under that, there are a host of different incentives and programs available. The small business program incentives that are $550 a kilowatt, up to 80% of the project cost. And then there's a lot of individual program incentives under that. So CPS and Austin, being very large municipally owned utilities, tend to have more offerings. Garland Power and Light, this is another example. They have an energy saver program. They're kind of a mid-sized municipally owned utility. And there, instead of a rebate, you can get it's a bill credit mechanism for, in this case, commercial lighting. So a lot of different things available. And they have flexibility, municipally owned utilities do, to again, develop incentives around priorities that are approved and determined to be priorities by the governing boards, the boards, the city councils, et cetera, that manage the utilities. Electric cooperatives, talked about this, kind of filling in the map still. 64 systems, these are distribution co-ops. In some cases, they have different efficiency program offerings. A lot of these tend to be focused on residential, which if you look at their customer base, the majority of the electric cooperatives membership is residential, so that's not a surprise. However, some do have commercial incentives, and some have, in some cases, maybe not a direct advertised rebate per se, but it could be a custom financial incentive program tied to sort of strategic reduction in energy consumption in different locations within their service territory. So it's a little tougher to negotiate or navigate, rather, electric co-op offerings, but there are some there that certainly could apply to PACE projects. With gas LDCs, you have really kind of 5 dominant investor-owned LDCs. CenterPoint, which is the Houston area for the most part. Atmos Midtex, that's the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Texas Gas Service, which is Austin, El Paso. Atmos, which is up in the Panhandle in West Texas. And then CoServe, which is kind of in the just north of Dallas, kind of a booming Denton, McKinney, Collin County up to Oklahoma area. And then you have municipal gas systems. The largest municipal gas system in the country, I believe, is CPS Energy, which is also an electric provider. So on the gas side, they have over 300,000 gas customers with different offerings there. And the commercial rebates available through gas LDCs tend to fall in these categories. Not all LDCs offer these, but many do. Commercial water heating is a big one. That can be moving from a storage type water heater to tankless. Some have a solar water heating incentive with gas backup. A lot of the incentives linked to food service, where you're doing a lot of cooking. You've got equipment that you might be able to change out and achieve some efficiency there. Some of the food service equipment, depending on how permanent it is, might qualify for PACE, but some of it may be just equipment that wouldn't, but that's worth looking into. Some offer direct install measures where they will actually contract and have the work done, which is a very easy turnkey way of getting things improved. Boilers, boiler improvements, burner improvements, and then furnaces. We don't have a big heating load in Texas, so there's not a whole lot of focus on the heating incentives the way that we see with electric utilities and air conditioning, but there are some incentives there as well. With water and wastewater utilities, low flow toilets and fixtures are most common. In some cases, the water utility will pay for the entire cost or provide the china, so to speak, for low flow toilets. They may not pay for the installation, so that may be something that could be financed through a PACE project, but the cost could go way down by having the low flow toilet actually provided. Again, kitchen and food service, irrigation systems, rainwater harvesting, cartridge pool filter in a pool situation, that is instead of a sand filter that requires flushing, so there's a water savings benefit there. And then other things, pressure regulating valves, alternative on-site water systems. These are things you typically see through water wastewater. So a couple of case studies to look at that tie this all into PACE. This is actually the very first PACE project in the state at a house of worship in Austin. Heating, ventilation, air conditioning, controls, and window film. And in this case, they secured an incentive of $11,000 through Austin Energy. The project qualified for the commercial rebate program, and so the assessment total was reduced by that amount, allowing it to cash flow faster and delivering utility savings that not only benefit the owner and help it qualify for PACE, but also achieve the utilities objectives of reducing peak demand in key areas. Another one, the Elgin General Store. This is a rooftop solar project. Here, in addition to incentives they secured through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, they secured a $38,000 rebate through Encore, the investor-owned utility that had incentives available for rooftop solar. So the assessment total there, $120,000, and significant electricity savings. So in the case of rooftop solar and some technologies that the cost is still higher than it probably will be still in a few years, but it's come down a bit. Incentives can help a lot and can really help drive down the cost through volume. A more conventional project, this is a commercial office building in Houston that involved HVAC, building controls, lighting, and this qualified for, and they secured a $30,000 incentive through CenterPoint, which is the investor-owned utility serving the greater Houston area. And this project achieved significant utility savings as well. So as you can see here, a $1.3 million project, while utility incentives aren't going to cover a quarter, a half, or even a quarter, they can help the project get over the qualification line, which is very important. And the money is there. It's the dollars are on the ground. It's just a matter of going through the process to find them, determine if you qualify, your project qualifies, and then how you apply them to the project. So some resources as follow-up from this. A couple of things here, and if my computer will cooperate, I'll do a little test drive, but the Electric Utility Marketing and Managers of Texas, UMOT, this is a group that formed not long after utility restructuring. These are the investor-owned utilities, the folks at those different companies responsible for operating the energy efficiency programs. What they recognize is that, hey, we're all playing by the same rules. We all have PUC oversight. It probably would make some sense to collaborate informally to the extent we can, so that we can learn from each other and improve these programs. So this group formed. They have on their website. Let's see. Sorry, went one too fast. Bear with me here. All right, we'll come back to this in just a second. Had an IT screen lockup here. Okay, and we're back. Just gonna quickly drive to the end because we're almost there. Okay. So texasefficiency.com. If you click on that, oh, I may have outsmarted myself with the. There we go. Okay. Apologies for the technical glitch there. So texasefficiency.com, what you'll see here is all about the utility programs. Uh, you can scroll down at the bottom, and I think this is particularly useful. All of the different investor-owned utilities are their efficiency programs are linked here through these logos. So we'll see if we can click through. This will work. So Paso Electric, for example, you can click straight there. You can go to their business programs, which would be applicable to commercial and PACE. And what you can see is they have different incentives. They have, go back here. So saving money and energy, efficiency tips, efficiency filings, load management, their Texas programs, large business solutions, shows how it works. Eligible projects, shows the different available incentives there. The Desire website, this is the database of state incentives for renewables and efficiency. Here you can sort by zip code, which is helpful to get started. Let's see. And this lists for zip code in Dallas, for example, a number of different incentives, both some financial, some programmatic. You can search by state. You can click on Texas, and what you can see is they have in this database 113 different policies and incentives. You click on that, it brings up the incentives, and then you can actually sort and refine by applying this filter to better isolate what you're looking for. Water rebates. This is actually a resource that is generally up to date, although I did take a look at a number of these links and some weren't as up to date as they could be. But here, for instance, among this list, you have Austin. You click on Austin and it takes you directly to Austin Water and their tools, residential, commercial, as well as rebates. Some of the things I talked about earlier, watering, rainwater harvesting, landscape, etc. And then there's a company based in Houston. Oh, go back. There we go. Sorry. Called Incentifind. This company figured out that there was a lot of incentives that are available. And like we've discussed from the outset of this webinar, many property owners just don't pursue them because it's challenging to find them. And so Incentifind is a service. Their process, they have kind of 3 steps. You can search for different projects. I think that is a free service. Then you can verify eligibility, which is a paid service that confirms the project you have in mind is going to qualify for the various incentives that are there, and they develop a report, and then they can actually help you apply as well. And that's a contingency-based fee for that. So I think the projects they have been involved in, they show a very good return on investment. So you're using their expertise to help navigate the process. It does cost money to get all the way to the end if they help you with the application, but the incentives you secure are far in excess of their fees based on the projects they've done so far. So again, that's a Houston-based company that can help navigate this process. So some tools there, search tools to help identify these better. And then general PACE resources. Our website, the Texas PACE Authority, is here. Events and training like the ones we have, like the one we have today, and also the link to YouTube. The YouTube video and recording for this will be there. Different case studies, like some of the ones I've shown, are all listed here. That's just a handful. And then also through the State Energy Conservation Office has an overview of PACE programs as well. So with that, again, apologies for the technical glitch a few minutes ago. Thank you for attending. If you have questions, please submit them, send them to me. As I said earlier, we will answer the questions and provide the answers. They'll be posted on the TPA's website and distributed to all the attendees. You'll also be getting a PDH certificate, the link to the webinar survey, and a copy that'll be sent out next week. And then mark your calendar, September 17th, 2020, today. We really just did a sort of a high-level overview of the types of utilities, the type of incentives available, how they might apply to a PACE project. On the 17th, it's going to be a deeper dive. We're going to have utility participants. These are the folks that run the programs for the different utilities to talk specifically about how they work, the mechanics of accessing them, budgets that the utilities have established for these programs, what the utilities' objectives are, and again, how they can be plugged in and aligned with PACE projects. So with that, we'll wrap up today's webinar. Thank you for attending, and we will see you on the 17th for part 2 of this, hopefully. So everyone enjoy the rest of your day, your weekend. Stay safe, stay cool. Thank you.